how way, ay, 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 ay. How we up, ay, 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 ay. How way, ay, 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 how way, ay, 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 ay.
Start with the face of Unicorn Riot, Lorenzo. Welcome to the bridge.
Hello.
Whoa. Today, you guys woke up early because you went out to an action. And is this something that you have to be ready for at any time? Or does somebody give you the heads up and you know?
I mean, I think that it's just something you have to be ready for at any time. You know, like a lot of times we get people asking us, like, how did you know about this and how did you know about that? And it's like, in the end, it's because we live in the camp and we stay in the camp. And so when people start mobilizing to do whatever they're going to do, we're right there in the camp, you know. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, yeah, you know, when you're also in the camp, you hear people and you can see people sort of doing what they're doing and kind of get ideas. But in the end, like, most of the time, you're just trying to be prepared for whatever is going to come. And there's really, you know, sometimes you're sitting around for hours thinking something's going to happen, and it doesn't. And then the next day is the same, and the next day. But in the end, all you can really do is make sure, like, all your batteries are charged and everyone's sort of, like, prepared to, like, go do it if we have to, you know.
Mm-hmm. Let's start with Chris. Which is your role with Unicorn Riot?
I mean, out here, I think we all do a lot of the ssame things, which is just, you know, trying to get footage or pictures or document what's going on. But other than that, I do a lot of public records requests. So I've probably sent, I mean, I've lost count, but hundreds of different records requests because there's so many different agencies from North Dakota or from other states through this emergency management compact that have been sent out here, or through the National Sheriff's Association, which is different. It's like all these moving pieces, like weird shit that doesn't usually happen with cops. So I try to dig up documents and just keep track of, it's like the pretty like extraordinary or like specialized forms of the state that only really show up when there's mass mobilizations threatening the existing like government or corporate order. So I try to keep track of that stuff, send lots of records requests almost every day, and like process documents and sort of just keep track of the details or the minutia of like what's going on with the police and how they're operating. That's what I try to hold down.
Wow. Well, that's been impressive, and it's been really, again, like I pointed out in the beginning, one of the fundamental differences that I've seen in the kind of media that you're producing through Unicorn Riot and other media sources. What have you found, Chris, with the government stalling tactics? So we all have these rights to these records, but at the same time they have mechanisms in place to try to keep that information from us. So how do you get around that?
I mean, ultimately there is no way to get around it. I think it's just persistence. And I mean, we've definitely gotten some interesting stuff. There's some stuff we're going to be releasing probably in the next few days. But they'll just say they can claim anything is under active investigation or claim that releasing it would harm public safety. Those are all pretty blanket things that they can just check a box and send you a form letter, and like your request is denied, and maybe you could refile it, or like if we could afford an attorney, maybe I could sue for some of these documents. But basically, like when they say no, that's the end of it, unless things come out through discovery of court cases and stuff, which we'll probably see in coming months. But at the end of the day, I mean, there's someone sitting in an office whose job it is to redact these things. Mm-hmm. Either they'll refuse to release anything, but often they'll release some stuff, and then it's still subject to human error, or you know, like the judgment of whoever is entrusted with that position. So some things do come out, and a lot of it is maybe the more exciting stuff of like how they're using stingrays or how they're keeping files on protesters. It's more a lot of the mundane stuff of who's talking to who's paying for it, what supplies are they using, like how are people getting paid. Those things are like harder for them to hide just because it's basic information that is like, it's like money, and there's always a paper trail with money. So I think just persistence and just always requesting things so that they end up having to give you something, and then at least you have a place to start. But yeah, there's definitely some Iron Curtain kind of shit going on where they're like, all of this is secret. So we'll see what comes out, and it might take a few years.
Do you think that the police calling natives, what they're doing a riot, is their strategy, or is it a function of them having to justify their toys that they have?
I think it's both. I mean, it's part of a strategy to justify, like, whatever violent actions the police or the military, like, want to take. They'll use the rhetoric to create a narrative to justify that, to make it seem reasonable. So I think that's what they've been doing. And then also, I remember the sheriff saying that it's like, even if people might think that it doesn't look like a riot, but technically in North Dakota, it's considered a riot if it's like 3 or more people deciding to break the law or encouraging each other to break the law. So they're intentionally using really vague statutes that other states might not have, is what it seems like to me.
What else have you found that's different in terms of them using emergency management law? And, because it seems like they're bypassing some fundamental requirements. Basically being able to get resources to do what they're doing. It's not a federal situation, but yet they're using the military. Do you think that they're actually smart enough to do that, or just they're never going to get federal support?
It seems like the feds have been sitting this out. I think it's just that I think the most convenient thing for them to do is nothing in this situation, so that's what they have been doing, and I think North Dakota is pretty annoyed at that. Their public statements have definitely, like, sort of been antagonizing towards Obama and the federal government, being like, why aren't you helping us? Why aren't you paying for this? In terms of I think it's the Emergency Management Assistance Compact, where they declare it was set up under the Clinton administration, like, intended to be for, like, floods, or, like, you don't have enough cops to save all the people from the flood, so you, like, tap in cops from surrounding areas to come, like, help save all the nice people who were going to die. Mm-hmm. That's basically, like, the reason this infrastructure was set up. But I think it was only ever used for protests in Baltimore after the police killed Freddie Gray. Mm-hmm. So that's the precedent for, like, mass protest being considered an emergency. And it seems to be the governor of any state. So, when Governor Jack Dalrymple in North Dakota declared the state of emergency, I want to say, was that in September or August? Declared a state of emergency, and then things were kind of, like, sort of chill, but the state of emergency had already been declared, which means that they sent out this EMAC, Emergency Management Assistant Compact request to, like, I think, like, every state got it. And then so it's up to the governor of each state to decide whether or not to respond to this request for emergency assistance. So basically any governor is sort of, like, empowered, like the president or, like, a monarch or something, to deploy law enforcement through the state emergency management agency, which then, like, sends people, will gather up people from other departments, like police departments or sheriffs in that state will be gathered up by the emergency management agency of, like, let's say Wisconsin or Montana. And then they deploy those people to North Dakota, who are then, like, oriented by the Morton County Sheriff. So it seems like most of the states that have been sending people are states that are, like, more conservative and, like, down with this, like, oil and gas law enforcement agenda. Mm-hmm. Whereas, like, other states seem to not have. But then there's also the National Sheriff's Association is also asking individual sheriffs to volunteer to send people here. So that's going on too. But yeah, they're definitely sidestepping the feds and just getting, like, the police or sheriffs are sort of like these autonomous agents that, like, deploy their forces at their own discretion, mm-hmm. which is something new about the situation out here, I think.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to get to too. This is definitely a new way of using the law. Did you want to speculate on if that will change things, or the way the law is written?
I've heard that some states, or at least people in different states, are trying to rewrite their emergency management acts so that those things can't be exploited to send cops to things like this in the future. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I guess the only thing else I would say about that is that, you can read into the politics of the either law enforcement officials or governors of the areas that are choosing to send police or sheriffs here. It's certain places aren't sending people,
The more liberal places? Or,
it would seem.
Or...
I would say that's a general theme.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So, Andrew, what's your role with Unicorn Riot?
I generally do the video stuff, I guess, videography and graphics, and I also help acquire all the gear that we need, and along with other people, and help out with the finances and fundraising aspects. A lot of the people in the collective help out with a lot of the same things, and it's pretty horizontal, and we're all pretty much becoming like specialists in all the same areas. But generally speaking, like when I'm out here, I'm behind the video camera when Lorenzo's holding the microphone.
Mm-hmm.
So that's generally what I'm doing.
And what are your biggest fundraising needs?
Oh, man. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, we definitely need gas masks, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
The other day we got tear gassed and half our crew didn't have gas masks, and that was not a great situation that could have been avoided if we had a little bit more funding for certain things like, gas masks. And then there's other things, I guess, just like, being able to like get our journalists to certain areas and be able to afford just the transportation for our volunteers to cover certain situations.
So transportation and gas masks, pretty much.
Yeah.
are the big expenses that you need help with, and people
Pretty
can
much.
donate through the website, right?
Yeah, people can go to unicornriot.ninja and donate there through our PayPal account, or mail us donations to our P.O. box, which is in Minneapolis, and you can check that out on unicornriot.ninja for the exact address.
Okay, great. So back to Lorenzo. What was your first action that you went to here at the No Doubt Ball?
I mean, I guess the first thing was the April 1st sort of ride from Fort Yates to Sacred Stone to set up the camp. I don't know if that's what you mean. Like, if that was like the first thing we witnessed out here was like this horse ride that was 30 miles long. And they rode to where they set up the camp, and they set it up, and they said we're setting this up to begin our prayers to stop this pipeline. So we were out here that first day, and I think that experience is vastly different from the experience of when the Army Corps gave a 48-hour notice saying they're going to allow drilling, allow the easement to make the road on the Cannonball Ranch. And that was the first time, I guess, where I saw these folks who had been here for months praying to stop this pipeline sort of meet the authorities, and meet the sheriff himself came out that first day. And I've been working on a piece about it, so I've been re-looking at all this stuff, and I always thought it was weird because that first day he literally came out and he was like, hey, just so you know, like, if you do this, I'm going to have to arrest you, and I'll be back tomorrow. And I always was like, wow, that's such a weird thing, But then when I look at their response, I realized that it's just the reason they didn't make arrests that first day is because they couldn't. There was two of them. It was like the sheriff and a deputy, and I think a few private security, and there was probably like 30 to maybe 50 people who were very steadfast that they were going to hold that space and not allow the construction crews on. And I was pretty sure the sheriff recognized that they didn't have enough people, and the next day they showed up with 20 vehicles and a bunch of officers, and they began their sort of creating lines of police to protect the construction crews, and people tried to move through those lines to get in front of them. It was like very clear their intention was to block the construction crews, and the police were there to ensure the construction crews did their work, and they started to arrest people. And I guess that was sort of when everything began, and it was definitely a very quick sort of escalation of not only like their tactics and arrests and the weaponry they were using and the assortment of like armor and armored vehicles that sort of started appearing, but also the rhetoric and the narrative building of why they were doing these things was also very intentional. I felt like so it was very coordinated. I mentioned that the day, like it was like a few days before the sheriff went on public TV to say that these people were reports of firearms and pipe bombs and gunshots in the area, that they had to like make this roadblock or whatever. And the day before that, he was shaking 300 people's hands who like went through, and they're like, this guy was like, this isn't our enemy, and everyone's okay, and then the next day he's like, these are violent people, and I was like, wow, this is wild, it's wild to watch this. And I think a lot of my experience has been in watching sort of the narratives being built to allow sort of a free hand by the state to do whatever they need to do to get rid of people who are trying to stand their ground for the things they believe in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've seen I've been able to witness from afar the narrative and the quick escalation, as you described, and so have so many other people. Do you think that your work will continue to bring people out here from places afar?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like people are aware of our media production and are aware of what's happening here, and people do come up to us and say, hey, like, I wouldn't have known this was going on if you all weren't out here. And that's always really amazing to hear, in like the world of the internet, there's so much content and information, and that the people are seeing ours, and it's showing them what's happening enough where they feel they have to come out here and feel compelled to come out here. And so, I mean, I think that our work does allow sort of access to like the front lines of struggles, which is kind of like what we wrote down when we were trying to make the collective. It allows like a way to see what's actually happening at that point of contact where a group of people want to hold their ground because they believe in what they believe in, and it's true, and they have to face off with a state who believes that the laws that are written are the only thing that matters, and they're also seemingly like writing the laws as they're enacting them, and it sort of just kind of plays out there. And I think people are usually shocked when they see that play out in a way where they're confused, where they think that people should have the right to stand in the ditch and say they don't want this to happen, or even the right to move onto land that was traditionally theirs, to not allow construction to happen. Like, they believe that is absolutely true and right, and then to watch the response from authorities, and I think it's very shocking for a lot of folks. Mm-hmm. And very like it kind of destroys the kind of narrative that's been being built for so long about how like that you have a right to your opinion. Mm-hmm. You have a right to air your grievances, and then it turns out that when that upsets a certain group of people, like, you're kind of met with extreme force. Or at least that's what happened here.
Yeah. It seems to happen to certain populations more than others, for sure. Mm-hmm. When you talk about the collective, can you go into a little more about what you mean?
Our media collective?
Yeah.
This, Unicorn Riot's we're a 501c3 educational nonprofit, horizontally organized media, like alternative media collective. And so a lot of the work we do is also like about how we conduct ourselves within our organization and how we work together, and it's all important to the work that you or the people or the viewers or supporters or people who have access to our media see. Like, that all happens because of how we've organized ourselves and how we work together, and it's a big part of, I think, who like Unicorn Riot is and is becoming, because it's also like a living thing that's like a constant conversation that's always moving and changing.
Yeah, living organism, and pretty new too, right?
When did we start? It was like a year and a half ago.
It was like the fall of 2014.
Okay.
That's when we started organizing, and then became an official non-profit organization in early 2015, like February, I think, or maybe it was March. But
do you find, as a non-profit, that, and anybody who wants to speak to it, that you end up having to chase the funding a lot, and it takes away from the mission, or do you think that you've been able to find some kind of a balance?
I'll say so.
Okay.
Well, a lot of what our funding comes from is from like small. I mean, it's it's kind of everywhere, but it's a crowdsourced, like, just what people can give us. So it's not, we're working on the sort of like getting grants from organizations and all that sort of idea of a nonprofit, but really we're very, very much viewer supported, and so that struggle, I think, is sort of dampened a little bit because this kind of create content, and then there are people who are following us see us constantly do this, and then that motivates them to support us because they know that we're going to do it. And I think that we've built that trust with like our viewership so far and the people who follow us so far that they know that if they donate to us, we're going to go and live in the middle of nowhere for months, and we're going to create content, and we're going to do the best that we can, and and everyone who's part of us of our Unicorn Riot is a volunteer, and like no one's really getting paid, and the only thing that we get is the ability to cover the things that we want to cover, and if we can get there, we'll get there, and based on how everyone's doing physically, mentally, and emotionally, like that's how long we'll stay. It seems like, as long as we can cover like rent occasionally and all that other stuff. But
what do you say to the Morton County Sheriff's claim of bias, that you're biased media?
I mean, you heard Chris say that we're doing Freedom of Information Acts. We quote their press conferences, like that they did report those things, and we think people should know, hey, they reported this, but we also point out that, hey, it was reported and there was never a confirmation. And I think that that's kind of real journalism. Like,
yeah.
We do spend our time on the front lines. When people are engaging and doing what they believe is right, like usually we are right there in that line. But also, I think that that's a perception that people need to see, and it also rounds out the whole narrative that's out there. Like it's not like these folks in the state are, the Morton County Sheriff, like he gets a press conference every day when he wants it. That there's, all these different media always show up, and they're always going to, and they're always, like print that stuff. But, out in the middle of, like this camp, that's not going to happen as much, and so like, I'm not too worried about the idea of bias. I think that I do have, my personal beliefs, and they may align a certain way, but when it comes to the work I'm doing, I think that what's important is that we give access to this information that exists to allow people to see what's really happening. And if that looks like bias, I'm sorry, it's just what's happening. Like this is really what's out there, and people deserve to know it and decide if they want to go with it or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when I heard that, I was thinking, well, I think that he's used to the media being biased for him, and so anybody who's going to tell the whole story is automatically biased for whoever he's against, is just so used to the deck being stacked for him.
I would say, if you look at where the mainstream media funding comes from, it's mostly large corporations that are backing these very same projects in various places, or they have their own profit agendas. And what we're doing is independent nonprofit media that's supported by the people, and that's a huge difference, and that's why people want to support us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people really want to know what the truth is and what's going on, and you guys are covering it, and I really appreciate your work so much, and I appreciate the time that you've taken to come and talk to me tonight. And anytime you need to get anything out, I'll be there. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.